The law of attraction is this incredible thing that can help you get virtually anything you want out of life. Or is it? Let's discuss. So the law of attraction. First, let's define roughly what it is. Basically, the law of attraction says that what you think about, you bring about. And essentially, there's kind of two parts of it. One is that your thoughts, and this is pretty logical, your thoughts tend to drive your actions. What you go do in this world is largely a function of what you think about the world. But more perhaps, of questionable nature, the thing that more people might have a challenge with is the idea that your thoughts not only determine what you do in the world, but your thoughts actually predetermine to a large degree the results of what you do in the world. In other words, the reason it's called the law of attraction is that you will naturally attract certain results and certain outcomes based on the thoughts that preceded the actions that you took to generate whatever the outcome or the result was. And that's, again, it's kind of a challenging thing. And if you Google law of attraction, or you go watch videos on law of attraction and read the comments in the articles or videos that come up, you'll hear all kinds of debate around it, and people usually kind of it's actually ironic, it's sort of self-fulfilling. The people that are really negative about the law of attraction could probably stand to benefit from the law of attraction, because their negativity has probably created a pattern of negative results in their life, which has created some cynicism around the law of attraction. And ironically, they could probably flip those results if they would be more positive on the whole thing. But whatever, I digress, and perhaps I'm out of my lane to make such speculation. But anyway, you'll quickly identify that there's a lot of debate around this. It's frankly, it's a little bit kind of woo-woo and metaphysical for a lot of people. But I'm going to suggest that there's the law of attraction. We should not dismiss it simply on the basis of the fact that we can't entirely explain it. I personally can say from experience that it does work from the standpoint of, when I tend to think more positively, more positive things tend to happen, and that reinforces the positive thoughts and makes it easier to think more positively still, which drives more positive things to happen. And there's kind of this upward spiral aspect. And I think most of us have experienced this in life. And then sometimes something will happen, or we'll have a little psychological hiccup, and we'll start thinking negative thoughts, and it kind of leads us down the opposite path where negative things start to happen. The negative things reinforce the negative perspective. We start to have more negative thoughts, more negative things happen, and we start going down. And then we end up in this, usually life is kind of this vacillation between those two. We're usually either descending or ascending, and when we're descending, we kind of have to do all this work and try to intervene on ourselves to flip that switch and get back into a positive frame of mind, and positive stuff can start to happen. And honestly, sadly, sometimes people never actually flip that switch, and that's when we hear stories of people that just, bottom out or commit suicide or destroy their lives, from addiction and shame and lots of horrible things. So I'm going to suggest that the law of attraction is powerful, really important, and something that, frankly, I think we ought to be teaching. To children. One of the reasons that maybe somebody would say, well, we shouldn't teach the law of attraction to children, is because, like we said, it's unscientific. It's not scientifically founded. So rather than try to prove the law of attraction with science, because I don't know, I think we're probably still a long ways from doing that, what I'm going to suggest is that science has done a great job in the last 50 to 100 years of showing us that we actually don't know more than we know, and that there is a wide range of phenomena that we're only starting to even be able to explain. And so then, logically, there's an even wider range of phenomena that we haven't even started to be able to explain. And for me, the thing that pushed me over the edge to go, okay, the law of attraction probably is real. It's not just anecdotal. It's not just coincidental in my life. It really, really seems to be of substance, was when I understood something called quantum entanglement. And it's not that quantum entanglement proves the law of attraction, but to me, quantum entanglement proves the types of forces and relationships in the world that would explain the law of attraction, and it makes it a lot easier for me to believe. And you can do your own research on quantum entanglement. The point of this video isn't to prove or to explain quantum entanglement. I'll simply mention it to you like this. Basically, what quantum entanglement says is that particles in the universe can get entangled, is what they call it, where they start to share common properties. And then you can take those particles and you can move them really, really far apart. And then you can do something to one of those particles and measure the impact of what you do. So let's say it's a and they've done this with subatomic particles. They've done it with molecules. They've actually done it with tiny crystals. They've done it with bacteria. So they've actually done it with living organisms. And you can do something to one of these particles or one of these objects, and the other entangled particle or object that is really far away, you can observe it, you can measure it at the same time, and what you do to one will produce the same impact on the other. And here's what's crazy, is that the measurements, if you take the measurements simultaneously, you'll find that the impact on the other object or the other particle happened faster than the information could have been transmitted from one to the other at the speed of light. So if light is 186,000 miles per second, that's how fast light travels, and theoretically nothing in the universe can travel faster than light, then how would it be possible, even if these objects are connected somehow, how would it be possible to do something to one and be able to measure the impact of that action, that whether it's zapping it with a laser beam or changing the temperature or passing it through some chemical process or whatever, and have the other object manifest the same result, the same impact, and be able to measure them such that there's not enough time, even if they were transmitting information back and forth, even if somehow inanimate objects or particles had some kind of brain that could transmit between them. How is it possible that the impact on the other could happen faster than the information could have been transmitted at the speed of light? We don't have an answer for that, but we have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of experiments that prove that this happens. That fact alone, to me, challenges the idea that our brain, based on the known laws of physics, are even that we're even capable of understanding all the phenomena in the universe, the phenomena that impact us as living beings, as objects of matter and energy every single day. And thus, we should suspend our disbelief. We should be willing to entertain things that defy our rational, concept of how things work, and actually trust what observation and experience tells us, even in cases where we can't explain it. Again, I'm not trying to say that quantum entanglement proves the law of attraction, but I am suggesting that quantum entanglement proves that we should be willing to trust phenomena in the universe on the basis of observation, even if we can't explain it. So on that basis, I'm going to suggest let's go forward and dig deeper into the law of attraction and trust that it's real, and at the very least, be willing to put it into practice in our own life and draw our own conclusions. So one of my favorite books, not favorite from the standpoint of I'm going to reread it 10 times over, but favorite from the standpoint of it had a really positive impact on my life, and I love what came from having read it, was a book called The Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod. And in this book, he basically sets up a morning routine, and he has all this, and since the book was published, there have been thousands and thousands and thousands of case studies of people that have utilized his morning routine and gotten incredible transformational results in their life. Similarly, inside my company, Entre Institute, we have something we call the Entre Way or the Entre Day, which is this basic framework of how we live our life every day. And we have thousands of case studies of people getting pretty dramatic transformational results in their life. And you can go look at like the work of, say, Joe Dispenza, and he has these meditative practices that he teaches that, created this cascade of thousands and thousands of amazing results. The point is there's a number of practices out there that have created these transformational results across thousands and thousands of, or in some cases millions of people's lives, that produce a body of evidence that supports the idea that these quasi-metaphysical, quasi-scientific, transformational things happen in life. And what we can link them all, whether it's Joe Dispenza, whether it's Hal Elrod, whether it's the stuff that I teach, the thing that we can link between all of them is that they essentially are rooted in the foundations of what can generally be summed up as the law of attraction. So using Hal Elrod's book as an example, he teaches this method for your morning routine called SAVERS, which is silence, affirmations, visualizations, exercise, reading, and scribing. SAVERS. It's an acronym. Silence, affirmations, visualization, exercise, reading, and scribing. So if you really look at that, one of those, exercise, it's pretty easy to explain, hey, how does exercise actually change the fundamental quality of our life? But the other 5, silence, how does being quiet for a certain period of time change our quality of life? How does affirmations, in other words, saying positive things back to ourselves, fundamentally change our quality of life? Visualization, how does picturing ourselves doing things successfully increase the probability of us doing those things successfully? Reading, we can probably maybe correlate reading to positive outcomes, because reading, you take in new knowledge, you apply the new knowledge, you get different outcomes. But scribing, why would writing things down fundamentally change the quality of our lives? Well, the reason that silence, affirmations, visualization, and scribing, and I guess to a lesser degree reading and exercise, impact our lives so positively is because when done with intention, they create the space and they create the focus around positive things. And that's fundamentally what the law of attraction is about. It's a set of practices, and it's a setting of an intention to try to crowd our mind, to fill our mind with the positive things, on the basis that where our focus goes, energy flows, and what we focus on tends to naturally happen. So the simplest application of the law of attraction as a starting point is to just fill our minds with so much positive, intentional awareness and thought that it crowds out the negative, that there's no longer room for negative. Because the flip side of the law of attraction, you maybe call it the law of detraction, is that if we think about negative things, we tend to attract negative things in our life. And I see this all the time. This plays out in my work, in my business, Entre Institute, where we help people start businesses or grow businesses, whether people want to become entrepreneurs or they already are entrepreneurs. We help them grow their businesses. And in virtually every student, we find that there's this natural point of resistance beyond which they very often are not able to move, on the basis of their thought patterns and their beliefs and their ideas and their attitudes about themselves. It's very hard for somebody who thinks of themselves as a poor person to become a wealthy person. That's why when people win the lottery, because let's face it, who plays the lottery? It's not really generally wealthy, successful people that play the lottery. It's people that don't believe in their own ability to become wealthy and successful through their own industry. Otherwise, they'd be reinvesting their extra dollars into a business or personal growth rather than gambling it on these tickets. And that's why most of the people that win the lottery, because they weren't the kind of people in the first place to truly become successful based on their own thoughts and their own attitudes and perspectives about their life, they typically lose the money. They're many times more likely to go bankrupt in life. And most people, years after winning the lottery, actually will tell you that winning the lottery was the worst thing that ever happened to them. And so again, we see this, and a lot of the work that we do in helping entrepreneurs develop actually becomes somewhat almost therapeutic, or at least in the personal development category, to actually teach them to think differently, because we have found that there is no greater predictor of someone's future success than the thoughts that they're thinking about their future in the present. Let me say that again. There is no greater predictor of a person's future than the thoughts that they're thinking about their future in the present. In a nutshell, that is the law of attraction. Now, I'm going to suggest a kind of a, I don't know if it's fully scientific, but a pretty interesting logical support for the idea that not only is the law of attraction real, but that actually as human beings, we are intended to operate from the law of attraction. We are intended to elevate beyond the base, like I said earlier, the basic bounds of daily thought and daily activity, and move into this more sort of sublime or opportune zone of life where all this pretty cool kind of crazy stuff can happen that almost defies basic logic. And I'm going to suggest that there's actually very logical support for that. And this is an idea that I got from a guy named Bob Proctor, huge evangelist for the law of attraction. Bob Proctor his work goes all the way back to the 60s, working under Earl Nightingale and Lloyd Conant with the Nightingale Conant Company. And Bob Proctor basically pointed out this. He said, we as human beings, we're the only species that has these, what he calls higher faculties. So, every species on Earth, every animal species and even plant species to some degree essentially operates off of sensory processing. We see things, we log what we see, or we process what we see, and we respond to what we see physically, right? Touch, smell, sight, taste, and so forth, right? But only human beings have what he calls the higher faculties. This would be willpower. This would be imagination. This would be creativity. This would be inductive and deductive reasoning. This would be, the power of or let's say intuition, right? We don't really know how to explain these things, but none of us dispute that we have them. And Bob Proctor points out that human being, every other species on Earth is essentially naturally in harmony or in some kind of proper orientation with its environment, right? Wolves are born into environments where wolves are designed to function, and the environments generally support the function of wolves. And wolves have a wolf instinct, or the wolf operating system, if you will, is based on a fit within its environment, right? Penguins do penguin stuff in penguin places. Human beings, on the other hand, are the only species that are actually born in any sort of disharmony or disorientation with our environment. This is the reason why the developmental period, that first of all, the gestational period, and then the developmental period, the growing up period of life for a human being, is so much longer than any other animal, because of our higher faculties, it takes us so much longer to assimilate into our environment. And nonetheless, every single one of us as an adult still harbors this general sense that something is amiss, something doesn't totally fit. We are disoriented in our own environment. Why would we be the only species on Earth that is naturally disoriented inside of our own environment if there was not a call to transcend the environment, if there was not a created imperative to try to move beyond our physical reality? We have these higher faculties, we have this sense of disorientation, and we have this ability to try to manifest different things in the world by applying our higher faculties. Why would all of that exist if we were not actually meant to do it? I got no answer. Clearly, we're supposed to be trying to gain mastery over our thoughts, gain mastery over this, mush of fat in our skull, our brain, right? And use it to try to impact the world around us. Otherwise, we would have just been born in a functional, natural harmony with our environment like every other species, right? Okay, so I'm going to give you 3 things that you can do practically in your life to apply the law of attraction. Before I do that, though, I want to just kind of peel away one more layer of analysis and general support of the law of attraction before we get into the pragmatic application of it. And I want to talk briefly, and I've talked about this in other videos, but I want to talk briefly about generally how we create the world around us, and we create our experience of the world around us. You may remember seeing my other videos, and if not, you should subscribe to my channel and go watch all my videos so that you always know when I'm self-referential to other videos. You may remember the video where I talked about ERTAS, the Extended Reticular Thalamic Activating System, and how we basically pull consciousness out of our own mind with this thalamic activating system, or the reticular activating system is how you may have heard it described. And we basically tune our perception to take the roughly 20 million bits per second of sensory data that we're taking in through our bodies, through all of our senses, through our subconscious. And essentially we use the reticular activating system, or the ERTAS, to focus the roughly 400 bits per second that we can actually process consciously in our conscious mind. And we use that to essentially paint our experience of the world onto the canvas of our physical reality that exists all around us, right? Like, we are constantly creating our own experience of the world. And it's only 1 out of roughly 500,000 bits of what actually happens in our life that we get to consciously experience and derive meaning from. Think about that. In that sense, if we're only consciously aware of 1 out of every 500,000 things happening to us, that's 400 bits out of roughly 20 million bits of data per second. And we have this mechanism in our brain that is choosing which bits of information to actually draw into our consciousness and to experience. Like I said, I use kind of a metaphor of painting it onto the canvas of our physical reality around us. And from that, to extract all of our meaning and all of our beliefs about what's happening in the world, and use that as the basis for what we decide to actually go out and do and create the results from in our life, it stands to reason that, well, geez, I'm operating off such a tiny sliver of what's actually going on around me. It's probably really, really important what tiny sliver of all that potential experience I choose to draw into my own consciousness, right? And I think when you start to understand it that way, it becomes really, really obvious that, like, man, I'm trying to think of a good example. If you walk into a bar and your intention is like, yeah, I want to find a person to, like, spend some time with, right? Maybe I'm lonely. I want to find a person to spend some time with. And there are 500,000 different people in the bar. Isn't your experience or your outcome of what happens in that bar probably going to have something to do with which one of the 500,000 people you decide to go up and talk to? Like, if you're in a room of 500,000 people, you could go up and talk to the homicidal maniac, or you could go up and talk to, like, the really nice, pleasant person who loves humanity and likes to have fun, or you could go up and talk to the really moody, depressed person, or you can go up and talk to the guy that, obsessively eats his own boogers, or, like, whatever you pick out of the 500,000 people is probably, sorry, the booger thing, I kind of laughing at my own joke. Hopefully somebody else is laughing at my joke, but I'm really laughing at my own joke. It's probably going to determine some of your outcome. So similarly in life, given that we're only actually able to consciously experience one out of every 500,000 bits of sensory data that come into our brains, how we tune our, think of it as like your radio antenna, pretty big deal. That's kind of at the core of the law of attraction, right? So with all that big preamble, let's look at 3 things we can do to actually apply the law of attraction in our life. The first practical tip for applying the law of attraction has to do with actually action. Attraction, can't spell attraction without action, right? So there's a principle in life that basically we create, or we sort of think of your brain as a muscle, right? And actually, as an interesting aside, in a body at rest, this is crazy. All of the muscles in your body, depending on your body composition, probably represent between 30 and 50% of your total body mass. And yet, all of the muscles in our body, except when we're actually physically exercising, burn together roughly about 15% of our energy. Then we have our little brain. Our little brain, which represents 2% of our body mass, and yet our brain uses about 20% of our body's energy, again, outside of when we're exercising. Think about that. 30 to 50% of your body mass is your muscles, your musculoskeletal, well, not your bones, but your muscles. And it uses, so 30 to 50% of your body mass uses 15% of your energy. 2% of your body mass uses 20% of your energy. I set that up so that, I know a lot of people that wake up every day and they're really obsessed with working out their bodies and trying to make their bodies look amazing and do all this amazing stuff with their bodies. And yet, I feel like in this world, we would all be a lot better served if we would tend to this little amazingly powerful machine that's inside of our heads and our brain and actually focus on training that. But in that regard, one of the things that we train inside of our brain is a correlation between thoughts and actions. And so the danger of the law of attraction, or a dangerous tendency, if you don't see it all the way through, would be to start thinking positive thoughts, but not allowing the positive thoughts to actually translate into different actions in the world. And the reason this is dangerous is you can actually start to desensitize from positivity. In other words, if you're not going to do different stuff, don't bother thinking different thoughts. But if you start thinking different thoughts and then you still don't do different stuff or take different actions, you actually desensitize, you disempower, you atrophy the parts of your brain that are trying to think the more positive thoughts. It actually gets harder to think positive the more you act negative. So as soon as you start thinking positive, as soon as you apply the law of attraction and actually start changing the thoughts that you have to translate it into action in your brain, or else you're actually increasing the amount of space between your thoughts and actions, and you're essentially, increasing your own helplessness and making yourself more subject to just sort of a reactive, whimsical way of living instead of an intentional, proactive way of living, because you're not taking action on the positive thoughts. So make sure that as you apply the law of attraction, you start thinking positive thoughts, that you're immediately and consistently translating it into different, noticeably different actions than what you were doing in the past. You should be able to, come home at the end of every day and really, really analytically say, okay, I had this different thought. This is a thought that I hadn't had previously, and I kind of pushed myself to have a different thought. And this is how I applied it. This is how it actually changed my behavior in the real world. If you can't create that correlation, there's a risk that you actually disempowered your positive thought centers in your brain. Hey, sorry for the interruption. I just wanted to let you know you can get a free copy of my book, The Millionaire Shortcut, which will show you the fastest way to become a millionaire in the new economy. And there's a special link just for this episode in the description. So thanks for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the episode. And the next practical tip for applying the law of attraction is consistency. And if you go scour through all the data around all the experimental data that they've done around helping people try to change the quality of their life based on changing the quality of their thoughts, one of the things you'll find is there is a direct correlation between changed outcomes and time applied or time practiced in the consistency of positive thought. So if you have really positive thoughts for one day, and at the end of that day, you try to evaluate your life and look for all this positive reinforcement that says, man, I had positive thoughts and I took positive actions and all these different positive things happened in my life, you won't find it. The bare minimum, and there's a common idea out there that says it takes 3 weeks to break a habit or to make a new habit, right? It takes 3 weeks to stop biting your nails. It takes 3 weeks to stop, binging on ice cream every night, or 3 weeks to get over, your girlfriend, boyfriend broke up with you, whatever. It's not actually 3 weeks. It's actually 67 days. They say that it takes 66 days. And on the 67th day, you can actually be naturally, in other words, through muscle memory or through, inculcated habit, be experiencing different things in life. So if you're going to apply the law of attraction, you absolutely should. Go ahead and commit. I'm going to apply this and I would just say, let's apply it for a full 90 days, right? Why quit at 67? Give yourself 3 full months to actually see the fruits of applying the law of attraction start to blossom. And then the third tip is about how we actually start to apply it. Here's what I want you to do. At the end of this video, do this exercise. I want you to take kind of the major categories of your life. I typically look at life as physical, personal, and professional. It's really simple. I call it the 3 Ps. And basically look at the 3 Ps of your life, physical, personal, and professional, and write down, a basic thought, some thought that you have, a negative thought that you have in those areas of your life. So physical, the thought might be, I can't stop eating late at night. Or the personal might be, I can't not get angry when my family, doesn't do the things I want them to do, or when my kids don't clean their room, or when my wife isn't just agreeing with me or something, right? Like I can't, like typically an I can't type of statement. And then in the professional area of your life is like, I just can't seem to make enough money. Write down these thoughts and then run it through kind of a law of attraction filter and come up with a very positive re-rendering of those thoughts. And the thing that you have to understand, or one of the things you have to understand in creating these positive versions of these thoughts, is that the subconscious mind, which is, again, where the 20 billion bits per second of data are happening, not just the 400 bits per second. So if it stands to reason, if 500,000 times more processing is happening in the subconscious mind, that's where the vast majority of our brain's energy utilization is happening, which means it's where the vast majority of the energy that we put out into the universe is originating from. It's from the subconscious. So however we apply the law of attraction, we have to kind of apply it using the laws of the subconscious mind. And one of the laws of the subconscious mind is that it thinks in images. It's actually a visual processing center of the brain. And so the subconscious there's certain words, there's certain concepts in our mind that our subconscious can't make sense of them. And one of them is the concept of the negative. So whether you say I can do something or I can't do something, saying I can't do something is just negating the positive that we can do something. In the subconscious mind, it's the same thing, because all it has is a picture, and there's no way to have a picture of the word no, right? So if in our subconscious mind we tell ourselves, don't eat cheesecake. So there's no picture of a command, and there's no picture of a negative, but there is a picture of eating cheesecake. So all our subconscious hears when we say don't eat cheesecake is eat cheesecake, because the word do and the word not, there are no images for that. There's just an image of ourselves eating cheesecake, right? So we have to be really careful in creating these positive iterations of our thoughts that we're going to, use to, sort of experiment with the law of attraction to make sure that we're creating pictures of really, really positive things. So in the physical category, instead of saying don't eat cheesecake or I can't stop binge eating late at night, say, something like, I nurture my body with a great balance of healthy nutrients at the times that I choose, right? So something that's entirely positive in terms of how the picture would look based on the words that you put down. Ditto for personal, ditto for professional. And so create these really, really positive thoughts across the different areas of your life, and then start frankly, looking at those thoughts, looking at those words every single day, say them to yourself over and over and over. Do that for 90 days and see where your life is. Okay? So those are the 3 tips for applying the law of attraction, along with a whole lot of somewhat scientific foundation and logical foundation for why you should believe in the law of attraction in the first place. Thank you for your time. Please, if you like this video, give it a like. If you'd like to get more videos from me and learn more about this crazy odyssey that I'm on to try to up-level the lives of every individual through, entrepreneurial and sort of rational personal development type of strategies, then subscribe to the channel, and I have hundreds more of these videos you can watch. Leave me a comment or a question. I want to know how this goes. Leave it today. What do you think? Even more interestingly, leave it in 90 days. Do this. Write the thoughts, think the thoughts, take the actions, see the results, and report back in 90 days. How did it go? I can't wait to hear back from you about how this went.
Hey, if you liked this video, then you're gonna love this video.
If we want to have better focus, we need to make fewer decisions. So how do we make fewer decisions in a world that seems to constantly bombard us with decisions? It's okay to make a decision, but don't make the same decision multiple times. Just make the decision once.